reverse that sacrament. So this creates a problem for the Roman Catholic Church, is they ordain people as priests who will always be priests regardless. And at the same time, they certainly have the ability and the authority to release you from celibacy. Now, I applied for that. You have to write to Rome, and you have to get all kinds of things, together, and eventually they either say yay or nay. Now, many priests who leave don't bother to do that; they just leave. Some will join other Christian communities, like they'll go into another church. That's not always the case, of course, but it can be, and they do. Now, in my case, I wanted to be released from it because I thought it was a formality that I thought that I should do. And I was eventually released. In fact, with me, it was very complicated because when I applied, Pope Paul VI was the Pope. And right after I applied, he died. So he had all this stuff on his desk, and then he died. John Paul II was then elected, and he was very conservative. And he let that stuff sit for like a decade. So I finally received the letter back, I guess it was the early 90s, when in other words, that I was formally released. So, I mean, it was kind of hilarious that it had to wait that long. And the only reason why I got it was because after much debate in Rome, they decided that whatever was on Paul VI's desk should be honored because it was during his papacy that this process began. And so they allowed all of us who persevered to be formally released. I worked, in those years, I worked in the telecom industry and in the IT industry and so forth. I'm retired now. But in 1997, I came out here on a project and I was recruited by the White Robe Monks of St. Benedict, which is an independent Catholic group. And there are many of these, by the way. This all started around 1870 when a Dutch Catholic community separated in schism from Rome over the question of the infallibility of the Pope, which was an issue in 1870. And the Pope at that time was very powerful, Pius IX, and he called a Vatican, that was the first Vatican Council. He called the council to run through a number of changes, which he did. One of which was they wanted to formally declare the infallibility of the Pope. Well, there was a cardinal from this Dutch Catholic group, which is now known, by the way, as the Old or Dutch Catholic Church, which they walked out in disagreement. And they are considered what is called a schismatic church. Rome recognizes their validity, but they feel that they're, in other words, they're not a union anymore, just like the Orthodox, which I think in 1054 split with the Roman Catholic Church. And the Roman Catholic Church accepts the validity of the Orthodox churches, but they don't. They're not in agreement with them, and they won't sanction anything they do. But they respect the ordinations as they did with the older Dutch Catholic Church. So the White Robe Monks of St. Benedict fall under the aegis of the Dutch Catholic Church, the older Dutch Catholic churches. In Holland, it's called the Old Catholic Church of Holland. And so the White Robe Monks have an affiliation there. So they are respected by Rome as a legitimate Catholic Church, but they're, in other words, they're in schism, just like the Orthodox. So that's where I fit in currently. That's what gives me my identity in terms of where my ministry is. Anyway, that's where it comes from. And Let me conclude about marriage and the ministry. I always felt, and I still feel, all of the learning that I've done in life, in every situation, the further away you get from nature, the worse off you are. And you can go right down the list of things in life. There's thousands of them, but the farther away you are from being in harmony with the natural order, then I think you're in big trouble. And therefore, the idea of separating marriage for clergy is insane. It's crazy. In fact, if you look at I think Paul's letter to Timothy, I think it's the first one, if you look through it carefully, you will see, he actually says to Timothy, who was one of his young disciples, he actually tells him to be wary of anybody who tells you that things like marriage are, in other words, are wrong, or that you shouldn't embrace it, and so on. In other words, he's trying to help him along in the ministry, and he actually warns him about it. It's right in the scripture. He's trying to advise him, and it's quite interesting. He said, "Beware of this." He said, that's not in the true gospel. But anyway, not to make a long story short, that's how I served. So that's how I was ordained a Roman Catholic priest. I was dispensed from celibacy, but now I serve as a Catholic priest, as an independent Catholic priest, with the white robe once. So just to make I just wanted to explain that. So marriage, I married in 1979. I have 2 children who are long gone. One lives in New York and one lives in Lake Tahoe. And truly, this is so obvious, I'm almost embarrassed to say it, that it's been through marriage that I really came to understand the true human experience. There's nothing like marriage there's nothing like marriage. In fact, I always used to say this when I first returned to the ministry. We applaud those who have great achievements, like we applaud those who win Olympic medals or who get Nobel Prize, or whatever the case may be. We say, wow, this is really unbelievable. What a great achievement. From my personal experience, nothing in life really can come to the achievement of marriage, in that it is the most challenging of all relationships. Now I know, some people have a little more, a little less, but frankly speaking, an interpersonal relationship like marriage is truly the biggest human challenge there is. There's no question about it. What you're called upon to do and to adjust, it's unbelievable. It goes on for decades, hopefully.
I agree.
And to be able to navigate that, you do need faith. I don't know how people without faith could ever manage a marriage, because it really gets to the heart of the human experience. And the human experience is troublesome. It's very troublesome, very challenging. And when you're in that kind of intimacy, all the good and all the bad is there. It all comes to the surface. And so we have a very high estimation of marriage. In fact, let me just, I don't want to drag this on because I know our time is over, but I just want to mention this. In the Catholic Church, believe it or not, in the theology of the sacrament of marriage, the ministers of the sacrament are the husband and wife, not the priest. So the priest really doesn't marry anybody, quote unquote. The priest is there on behalf of the church to bless the union, but not to actually officiate. And it's the same with the state. The priest is or the minister is the witness for the state to formally seal it and say, yeah, it is legal. But the ministers of the sacrament are the husband and wife. They create the union. They create the sacrament when they exchange the vows. Now, if you go to get married in, let's say, the Catholic Church, you have to go through all kinds of things, you know. You've got to sign all kinds of stuff, but you've got to go through all kinds of investigations and so on. And then usually, you have to follow the exact rituals that they say, and you have to get married in this place, and you have to do it this way. So in other words, it's really dictated. In other words, you really have to get married in the parish. They don't want you to get married, let's say, outside at a winery or something. There's nothing theological about it. That's strictly a church discipline. So the point I'm making is that the attitude, even though on the books, the theology of marriage says that the husband and wife are the center and they marry each other, the practice is foreign. The practice is, in other words, you have to comply with the rules and regulations of this and that, of the institution. You'd never know that the couple was the center of this whole thing. It's the church, you see. It's the authority, you see. And that's where it's just ironic. It's ironic. So even when you have something that is right on the books, you don't follow it at all. The power of an institution. That's why these local churches like yourselves are much closer to Jesus Christ. Because as a community, you practice exactly what the Lord preached. And it works. It works. It works. Well, anyway, you're very kind. I'm sorry that I went over, but I want to really thank you for this opportunity. You're wonderful people, and you've inspired me today, and I'll certainly keep you in my prayers, as I hope you will. Thank you, Father Jerry. Thank you.